everyone, welcome back to PIA Northeast The Break. Today we're doing the second part of the New York HERO Act, specifically the section on the Workplace Safety Committee. So to talk about what the Workplace Safety Committee requirements are, we have Brad Lachut, our Director of Government and Industry Affairs. And without further ado, I'll just turn it over to Brad.
Great, thank you very much, Claire. Thank you everybody for joining us today for this next session of The Break. As Claire mentioned, we're going to be talking about the HERO Act again, which we've covered in a previous break, but this time we're going to talk about the Workplace Safety Committee. So the New York HERO Act, just a quick summary, it's intended to prevent current and future exposure to airborne infectious disease at the workplace. As you might have guessed, it was born out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it is an attempt to, prevent further pandemics. The law has two main requirements. The first, the adoption of an airborne infectious disease prevention plan. We've covered that in a previous break. We've also have numerous articles on PIA News and Media site on this. The links will be shared here as well. Just briefly, it requires every employer in New York State to have an airborne infectious disease prevention plan. The New York State Department of Labor has developed it. I would encourage all employers just to adopt that. Again, we have more information in the links below if you want that. There's also another part of the New York HERO Act, and that is the establishment of a joint labor management workplace safety committee. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. This part of the law is effective November 1st, 2021. So there's a longer implementation date for the Workplace Safety Committee than there is for the Airborne Infectious Disease Prevention Plan, which needs to go into place by the beginning of August, if I remember correctly. So let's get into the details of what the Workplace Safety Committee is. First of all, and this is important to note, it only applies to employers with 10 or more employees. Now, this is only the Workplace Safety Committee portion of the law. The infectious disease prevention plan that I mentioned applies to all New York State employers. So just make that clear. So this Workplace Safety Committee portion only employers with 10 employees or more. And it requires, or I shouldn't say it requires, what it states is that employers must permit, quote unquote, permit employees to form workplace safety committees. And it doesn't require an employer to create one or be active in its creation, only requires them to permit the committee to exist, basically. The law does not specify a minimum or maximum number of committee members, but it does go into some details as to how the committee is supposed to be populated. At least 2/3 of the members of this committee have to be employees that are non-supervisory. So you cannot load it up with management. It's got to be the rank and file, if you will, 2/3. Those employees, that 2/3, should be selected by and from among non-supervisory employees. So that's important to note. Not only must the pool of employees be non-supervisory, but they have to be selected by non-supervisory employees as well. So the CEO of a company couldn't say you, and you are going to be on the committee. That doesn't work out. It's got to be non-supervisory employees making the selections as well. And then leadership in the committee is required to be split between co-chairs. One chair representing management, the other representing the labor workforce or non-management. There are some restrictions in terms of meetings. The committee must be permitted to meet at least once a quarter, but the meeting times can run no longer than 2 hours. An employer can choose to let them run longer if they want to, but under the law, they don't have to go longer than 2 hours. In addition to that, employers must also permit safety committee designees to attend training. That training can't exceed 4 hours, though. So employers don't necessarily have to pay for that training, but they do have to allow their those members who are on the committee to attend those trainings. So committee responsibilities quickly here. They do have some real responsibilities stemming out of this law. First, raising health and safety concerns to the employer. Any concerns that come up, they raise the employer must respond. You cannot just throw them away. They have to take them seriously and respond. It's spelled out in the law. If you don't do so, you could end up being fined. In addition to that, just general maintenance of what's going on in the workplace. The committee is in charge of reviewing and providing feedback on any policy put in place in the workplace required by this HERO Act. So that would include the Airborne Infectious Disease Prevention Plan that I mentioned earlier. That should be reviewed by the committee. Now that plan is already going to be in place by the time the committee is set up. but just be aware that should happen. In addition, any other policy that's put in place in the workplace related to health and safety by a law or any other directive should be reviewed by this committee. They also would be able to participate in any site reviews by any governmental entity coming in and seeing if all the standards are up to snuff, so to speak. Those committee members would be able to participate. And then finally, reviewing any reports filed by the employer related to health and safety in the workplace, checking it for veracity and that sort of thing. They would look at it before it went on. And then finally, on this workplace safety committee is the retaliation provisions in the law, which states that employers are prohibited from taking any adverse employment action against any employee who participates, including in the establishment of these committees. So as I said, employers aren't required to create them themselves, but they have to permit it, and they cannot stand in the way of employees who are trying to do so. So with that, if there are any questions on this workplace safety committee or the airborne prevention or airborne disease prevention plan, you can ask questions from me and Claire, contact the Resource Center. And as I mentioned, there's links below for all the information on those prevention plans. So with that, let me turn back over, see if Claire has any questions.
Yeah, I think just one big question is the employer obligated to implement what any recommendations or feedback from the committee, such as a vaccine, if the committee requests or recommends a vaccine requirement, but the employer has already decided that for various reasons, they're not going to require a certain vaccine for any given disease?
Great question. So the law states that the committee has the ability to review policies and procedures, but does not state they have the ability to override those decisions. So certainly they could voice their opinions to the employer, but the employer is not obligated to take any sort of action based on that. Certainly the employer should take it into consideration, though, just as a matter of business, but legally they don't have that authority.
All right, terrific. Well, thank you, Brad.
Of course. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. If there is any questions, please let us know. If not, you'll see us very soon for another edition of The Break.